Before we get into today's stories, visit dreadsarmy.com to sign up for the Dread Weekly newsletter so you don't miss out on any updates. Also, check out all of the channels in the Dread Network on dreadsarmy.com or in the description below. Thanks for listening. Now let's get to the stories. Hey Donovan, so this happened about 3 years ago. I was sitting at home one summer day, trying to beat the heat. In case you're wondering, I lived in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and my house overlooked this old, seemingly abandoned building. I had always been intrigued by this building. It just sat there on the edge of the neighborhood, stripped of any life. The worn-out red bricks, the twisted metal infrastructure of what once was likely a booming factory of some kind. It definitely seemed eerie. But hey, I didn't bother nobody about it, even if it was just across from my place. Well, that particular day was what we usually call a scorcher. I was lying on my old worn-out couch covered in sweat and trying to remember clearly when I last got the AC serviced. But that's not the point of the story, but it's what I consider the pieces of normality before things got far from normal. It was around noon, I think. Now, generally, with a heat like that, the neighborhood was quiet during midday. Even the local kids dared not play outside. It was the kind of silence where you could distinctly hear the hum of a passing-by vehicle or someone's lawnmower from several blocks away. Anyhow, I'm there, losing the battle against the heat, when I notice some movement near the old building in my sleepy peripheral vision. Who would be moving around the deserted warehouses at this time, in this sauna-like weather? I was curious. I decided to investigate, at least from the cool confines of my scorching hot living room. I grabbed my binoculars from the drawer by the window, where I like to indulge in amateur bird watching on pleasant days, and had a look-see at the building. Well, I wish I could say it was teenagers up to shenanigans, but that wasn't it. This was different. I noticed a couple of black vans parked in front. They looked new, shiny, out of place amidst the dusty bricks and rusty steel of the facility. Just as I was thinking about it, a group of men, all dressed in black suits, stepped out. No, not the common folk that you'd usually expect to see around here in Green Bay. They moved into the building with this strange sense of urgency and purpose, their faces stern and hidden behind pitch-black sunglasses. This was at the height of the midday sun, baking asphalt and wilting flowers. And there they were, strutting around in their brand-new black suits without a bead of sweat. At this point, I thought my brain was playing tricks on me. Maybe it was the heat stroke or dehydration creeping up on me. But then, I noticed a flickering light inside the building. I couldn't make out what it was, but it was definitely odd. Subtle changes in hue, from a sharp white to soft blue, then an eerie green. Didn't make sense for a building that was supposed to be abandoned, right? So, there was this otherworldly glow I noticed inside the building, bouncing off the walls inside. Ordinarily, I would have made up my mind there and then to call the cops, but an odd fascination held me back. Perhaps it was the strange flurry of activity around the deserted building, or the odd timing of it all. I decided to keep watching, half in fear, half in curiosity. As the men were moving around inside, every so often carrying out some peculiar-looking equipment to their vans, there was this intensity to them. As I kept observing, I noticed more vans arriving, quietly, without causing a stir. The sun began to drop beyond the horizon, and the eerie green light inside the building somehow grew even more intense. I sat there captivated, my eyes straining in the dim twilight to keep tabs on their activities. Then it happened. Something shifted. It's hard to describe it in words. The air around the building momentarily shimmered, like heat radiating off a sweltering road, and then everything went dark. The strange men ceased their activities as dark figures against the background of the now silent building. I must have jumped nearly 3 feet in the air when my phone rang, breaking the silence of that sweltering summer evening. It was the local pizza delivery guy, who must have thought I was mad, as the odd occurrences made me completely forget I had ordered a pizza. After hanging up, I turned back to the window, gripping the binoculars, expecting the spectacle to continue. But instead, I was met with an empty, quiet street. No men, no vans, and the old abandoned building stood there once more, silent and lifeless. In the aftermath, I was left with more questions than answers. Was it some sort of black ops secret facility conducting an undercover operation? Was it just my fanciful imagination, spurred on by the unforgiving heat of the day? I even went as far as asking the neighborhood kids, who I thought might dig around for adventure, but none was the wiser. Everything felt too surreal and strangely unsettling. Needless to say, I never saw any activity around the building again, but its presence, looming at the corner of the street, started symbolizing something more sinister to me than just worn-out bricks and rusted metal. The sleepless nights following the incident were full of ominous dreams, and I started considering moving. Even looking at the building was enough to give me an eerie, unsettling feeling. To this day, the puzzling string of events keeps bugging me. The thought, what were they doing in that building, has stubbornly decided to resurface in my mind every now and then, always accompanied by the chilling memory of the intense green light. Piece of advice from me to your viewers: if you ever come across a seemingly normal sight that triggers this odd sinking feeling in your gut, maybe you should trust your instincts. I guess I've always felt most at home while floating down a river. I like being surrounded by the subtle sounds of nature, the rhythmic lapping of water at my canoe, the hum of cicadas. And while I'm not normally one for sharing these types of stories, this particular experience was too strange to keep to myself. It was on one of these trips, a lazy Saturday in Providence, Rhode Island. I usually go canoeing in the heart of summer when everything's vibrant and lively. I find it an ideal way to soothe my mind from the buzz of city life. That day started like any other. The sky was a clear blue with scattered puffy clouds. I'd been out on the water since early morning, stopping now and then to catch my breath, have a light snack, or just recline and admire the view. I had paddled quite a distance away from Providence downtown and reached the peaceful and secluded spots where the river wound through the heart of the forest. There was a sort of comforting greenness in those moments, looking at all the shades from mint to pine. As I silently glided across the river, I looked closer at the things around me. Funny how within these quiet moments, you notice the smallest details that you never did before, like the ripples in the water as a fish swam by, or the minutiae of a dragonfly's wings as it hovered over lily pads. I slid my paddle through the water, steering my way closer to the edge where the maples leaned over the water. I reveled in this moment of serene solitude, oblivious to the strange unfolding that was soon to befall. I was about to head back when an odd clicking sound shattered the stillness. It was definitely out of place, not at all like the typical chorus of nature sounds I was used to. Intrigued and bemused, I decided to paddle further upstream to investigate. Slowly moving towards the sound, my eyes were scanning the tree line, searching for what could be producing the strange click-clack. It felt a bit mechanical yet animalistic at the same time, a strangeness in the serene wilderness. I started feeling something unnatural, a growing sense of uncomfortable prickling at the back of my neck, a feeling of being watched. I've been out in the woods a good bit of my life, but I've never felt like this before. Being observed by something unseen yet palpable. It sent the hairs on my neck shooting up, and an unexplained chill ran down my spine, despite the summer heat. But in spite of the discomfort, my curiosity had taken hold of me, and I ventured further in, drawn towards the peculiar sounds. Little did I know, I was about to encounter something beyond my wildest imagination. Just as I was considering turning back, the normally lively sounds of the forest fell ominously silent. The vibrant chattering of the birds, even the slightest whispering rustle of the leaves, seemed to have been sucked out of the air. Yeah, I noticed the water around me changing too. Familiar ripples from passing fish and bugs were replaced with unusual, substantial splashes, like something quite big disturbing the surface. I paused, feeling every nerve in my body jangling like alarm bells. And that's when I saw it. Something unholy crawling on the riverbank just about 20 feet away from me. The clicking sound and the stirring water both were making sense now. It startled me to the core. This creature, it looked almost human but was distorted in a way that things of nightmares are. The way it moved, damn, it was terrifyingly abnormal. Crawling on its hands and feet, it was lightning fast with a surprising grace for something that ungodly. It was also quite tall for something that you'd normally see out here. It was maybe 5 or even 6 feet, just scrunched down like a contortionist in a box. Its body was entirely naked, as if void of any characteristics and absolutely pale. The head was the most off-putting part. Its face was, if you can term that a face, hollow, except for 2 humongous black eyes. It seemed to consume all the light around, like a void. There was an open and gaping mouth and no traces of a nose. But it was a living creature, and it was indeed making that clicking sound, producing a ghastly echo reverberating through the silence around. It was terrifying but also captivating in a way, like seeing a horrific car crash. You want to turn away, but you can't. I felt my heart thud against my ribs, every muscle frozen, as if I was turned to stone. Just as abruptly it had appeared, the creature turned around and melted back into the forest, leaving in its wake a severely rattled me. I tried to regain control over my thoughts and body, every nerve of mine pulsing with adrenaline. Hastily, I turned my canoe around and paddled off in the other direction towards safety as quickly as possible, leaving behind the eerily quiet spot. Ever since that encounter, I can't help but question what happened that day. It feels like a dream, a really horrible one, but I have this irreparable sense of knowing that what I saw was real. It was there. It wasn't my imagination, and flares of fear still grip my heart when I try to picture that skeletal figure in my mind. Until this day, I have no solid explanation for what it could be. I've heard stories about mysterious creatures in the woods before, but until you see something like this with your own eyes, you don't truly believe it. That day, something changed in me. I saw something surreal, and it left a profound and long-lasting impact on me. It forever altered how I view the quiet wilderness of Rhode Island. I'm writing to you from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to tell you about an escapade I had that was absolutely insane. It was mid-August 2012, just after my 32nd birthday. I found myself standing at the base of the hauntingly inviting Franconia Ridge. The New Hampshire sky was clear with low humidity. A perfect day for climbing, or so I thought. I get those adrenaline surges about climbing. The thrill of the challenge, the rush of risk, and the satisfaction of conquering a wall can't be compared to anything. For me, it's more than a simple pastime. It's an addiction. And that trail that day was just the tall glass of rock vodka that I craved. I love the sturdiness of the cliffs, the gravel crunching under my climbing boots, and the crisp mountain air. A good climb always reminded me how alive I was. With the firm grip on my rope and the pick in my hand, I started scaling that vertical, rough, and fantastic mountain. I was on my usual finesse, mastering every nook and crevice, pushing myself. As I strained upwards, meticulously avoiding the treacherous loose rocks, the last thing on my mind was running into anything peculiar. Obviously, you expect some bird nests, a drop of sap from a pine tree, or, at worst, an unexpected gust of wind. You don't expect a face-to-face encounter with the more insane aspects of the natural world. But sometimes, you don't always get what you expect, do you? In retrospect, a part of me feels like I sensed it before I even saw anything. A certain heaviness in the air, an inexplicable shift in the atmosphere. The normal chirping sounds of the mountain had faded to a deafening silence. The quiet was so profound that I could hear my heart thumping against my ribcage. Suddenly, there was a weird, almost nauseating smell that overcame the wind carrying pine and fresh earth smell. It was a mishmash of wet dog, a faint scent of skunk, and something that smelled awfully like week-old garbage. The odor was so overpowering, it made me nauseous. I clung to that rock surface, trying not to retch. Then I heard it, the sound, a low growling rumble that echoed through the silence. a sound so strange and intense it made the hairs on my nape stand up, somewhere between an animal's howl and an eerie whooping noise that was far from any animal sound I'd ever heard. At this point, I wasn't just shocked or puzzled. I was downright terrified. It wasn't the fear of the immediate danger. It was the uncertainty that was freaking me out. I felt like a baby mouse being watched by an eagle circling miles above it, invisible yet threatening. As I cautiously moved my eyes around, searching for the source of the sound, I suddenly saw it, or at least I saw a part of it. Suffice it to say, my blood ran cold. Damn, I wish I could say it was just a bear, or even a rogue mountain lion. But it was neither. What I saw was giant. It was at least 7 feet tall and burly, a linebacker figure about 100 feet off to my right, on a flat ledge of the mountain. It was covered in hair like a grizzly, but redder and shining under that midday sun. And the smell, that rancid, gag-inducing odor, was undoubtedly wafting from it. The creature's profile was distinctly Neanderthal-like, with a cone-shaped head jutting out a little further than its massive chest, and its eyes were these beady, shiny little things, like dark, polished stones. Its face, though, that was the kicker. It didn't have hair on its face like the rest of its body, and despite the distance, I could make out a pronounced strong brow ridge, bridged nose, and thick lips. What rang in my ears next was a loud yelp-like sound that echoed off the granite cliffs, followed by a deep, throaty growl. It was almost primal, a menacing auditory warning that told me to stay right where I was. Time seemed to slow. I clung there, a third of the way up this massive wall, staring wide-eyed at this strange, hulking creature on the ledge. To my surprise, it didn't move. It just emitted another noise, a low rumble, which in hindsight could have been a call or a warning, I don't know. Swallowing hard, realization hit me. There was only one creature with these descriptions, the elusive Sasquatch. Hovering between fascination and stark terror, I made a split-second decision. Instead of scrambling upwards, I decided to awkwardly crab-walk my way horizontally across the massive rock face, putting some distance between me and the creature, hoping it wouldn't follow. Once I moved out of the creature's direct line of sight, I continued my climb at lightning speed. Every rustle of the wind, every bird's cry, seemed to amplify the fear coiling up in my gut. Even when I reached the top, my eyes darted back towards the ledge, but the Sasquatch, or whatever it was, had disappeared. Once I descended and safely got back to camp, I found everything as I had left it. No monstrous creature wreaking havoc or leaving gigantic footprints. I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. That night, I replayed the event over and over in my head. I wondered if what I'd seen was real or a fear-crafted illusion, but the hard claw of fear had paled in comparison to the exhilaration of journeying into the unknown and the astonishment of encountering a creature that storybooks and legends are made of, an actual Sasquatch. The belief that I had witnessed something rare and riveting had me eagerly wondering about the future. Climbing like the mountains offered a peculiar mix of brutal realism and dreamy escapism, and the experience just reminded me why I push myself to limits and scale mountains. It's not just for the thrill of standing atop a victory climb, or for the adrenaline high that you feel at 4,000 feet. It's also for these chance encounters that weave themselves into lifetime experiences that are worth sharing. I live in the beautiful city of Salem, Oregon. In my humble opinion, it's the absolute best place for people who love to dive headfirst into nature. Even our trails have a certain magic about them. So, as part of my daily ritual, and for the sheer love of it, I trail run with my four-legged partner in crime. His name is Rusty, and he is a border collie who's just as adventurous as I am, and that's saying something. I swear that dog was born to run. He's got this kind of wild spirit that makes you fall in love with him instantly. This story I'm going to share with you, it takes place on a crisp, sunny afternoon. Honestly, the weather was so perfect. It's one of those days you wish you could bottle up for later. The leaves covering the trail in a rustic toned blanket. Rusty and I started off at our usual pace. me trying to match his enthusiastic bounding with my steady jog. The rhythm of his yips and the crunch of leaves under my shoes were relaxing. It is during these runs that I feel truly connected with nature and everything around me. We were about halfway through our usual trail when Rusty's behavior began to change. This dog, who was always so full of life, seized up. His ears flattened against his skull, and a low growl rumbled in his throat. It wasn't the playful growl I'd come to associate with him spotting a squirrel or a rabbit. It was more fearing, protecting. Whatever it was, it set my nerves buzzing. I came to a halt, trying to catch what had alerted him. The trail was quiet, almost oppressively so, and I swear even the air smelled different, sickly sweet yet metallic, like the air in a room with too many electrical appliances. A whiff of something foul hit my nostrils, instantly making me wrinkle my nose, dread settling into my gut. It wasn't natural, or at the very least, it was a natural smell that had no business being out here, where the only scents were pine, earth, and sometimes Rusty's wet fur. Suddenly, as we stood there trying to figure out the rancid smell, a chilling howl echoed through the woods, sending a ripple of fear through my every nerve. I'd heard enough dog howls, and that hadn't been one. It sounded strange, guttural, and off. I was about to move, to pull Rusty back to the trail we'd come along, but the creature that appeared out of the bush was quicker. In my gut, I knew it wasn't a dog. It was too big, easily towering over us at 7 feet tall, with darting demonic eyes that looked far too intelligent. It was covered in dense, matted hair, so dark it was all I could do to make out its features. Its body was a jumbled mix. The bulkiness of the chest and the wide set of shoulders looked human, but its legs were all dog, capped off with overly large paws. It had a long snout carrying a double row of teeth that looked anything but friendly. A sharp, dangerous gleam accompanied those teeth and was the focal point of its grotesque face. The moment those eyes locked onto me, time seemed to slow. My heart pounded in my chest like a war drum, and I felt a chill run down my back. Rusty was still growling, the deadly seriousness in his canine voice reminding me how real this was. Desperate, I stumbled backwards, pulling Rusty with me, my mind frantically looping on the thought of escape. It growled, the sound piercing through the air as it lunged in our direction. However, we were quick on our feet and managed to put a good distance between us and the creature. Escaping from what I now began to realize was something far beyond my comprehension. Even once we had made it onto the main trail, with the terror of the encounter behind us, it didn't feel real. It felt like a horrible twist of nature, a fiercely primal predator pulled straight out of a chilling horror movie. The absurdity of what we saw was so profound, it was hard not to second-guess my own memory. In the days that followed, I was left with the echo of fear and a newfound respect for the unexpected. Comparing our usual, peaceful runs to the frightful experience, I was reminded just how swiftly tranquility could morph into terror. A walk in the wilderness was never going to be the same. Moreover, Rusty's reaction has had me marveling at the power of a dog's intuition. I was left with an insane amount of gratitude for my four-legged buddy. If it hadn't been for his initial warning signals, I don't know how things would have turned out. So, Donovan, that's my strange tale. I'm still coming to terms with how a run in the woods turned into a face-to-face encounter with a creature that I can only categorize as what cryptozoologists call a dogman. I'm not saying I'm a full-on believer now, but let's just say I've got a newfound respect for the mysteries of the world, and I don't take Rusty's warning signs lightly at all. Hey there, I thought I'd write in and share a tale that happened while I was out on a kayaking trip. Your show tends to deal with a lot of urban legends and strange happenings. And well, I reckon I've had an experience that fits the bill. I live in Springfield, Illinois, as run-of-the-mill a place as any, but every now and then, I get the itch to go off the beaten path. On this particular occasion, I decided to take a solo kayaking trip to one of the woodland rivers we have nearby. You can't really beat the peace and quiet of being out in nature, don't you think? The sun's just breaking through the trees as I set off on my kayaking trip. It's a beautiful day, truly. I got my supplies all packed, waterproofed the essentials, and went through the whole safety routine before I pushed off from the riverbank. My kayak glides through the water effortlessly, barely leaving a ripple in my wake. One of the best parts of these trips for me is the wildlife. The river cuts its way through the forest, and sometimes it feels like you're the only human around for miles. As I was paddling along, birds chirped above me in the canopy, and the sun cast long shadows on the forest floor. Further down the river, I spot a family of deer tentatively taking sips of water at the shore. I stay as quiet as I can, not wanting to startle them. I feel content, calm. Everything's as it should be. The first oddity strikes when I notice that the woodland noise has fallen eerily quiet, like someone's hit the mute button on the world. Didn't think much of it, figured maybe a predator was nearby, so I keep paddling, but it kept nagging at me. All of a sudden, a shiver runs down my spine. You know, that feeling you get when it seems like you're being watched. I stop my paddling, stay still, looking around, trying to figure out what's setting my instincts on high alert. And then, in the bleary after sunset light, I see something unusual on the riverbank. I first notice a strange shape, tall, substantial, and shadowy. I squint, try to make sense of what I'm seeing. Whatever it was, it didn't belong in this world. It was neither human nor animal, like a silhouette that didn't fit into this tranquil landscape. Now, if this were a fishing story, I'd probably be talking about some giant fish. But out there on that peaceful river, that's where this unidentifiable creature made its entrance. But that's a tale for another time. To be honest, I've been doing very much like what most of us do when things get weird. I keep it to myself, put it at the back of my mind and try to keep moving. But now, maybe it's time to share. I mean, weird stuff happens all the time, right? Sometimes there aren't any explanations, and this, my friend, is one of those times. So, I was right in the middle of the river. It had started to darken now, sunset blazing in the skies above. I've seen a lot of wildlife in these parts, but whatever I saw that evening, it didn't seem quite right. You've probably had moments like these, where things appear strange or out of place. And there it was, this disproportionately tall figure standing on the bank. It was too distant to make out clearly, but there was something bat-like about it. It appeared to be standing on two legs, but was taller than any critter I've ever seen around here. The edges of its body seemed to flutter subtly with the evening breeze, hinting at what looked like wings, and it didn't move from its post for a good few minutes. In retrospect, I couldn't understand why I didn't take out my camera. Noticing it fully wasn't the problem. It was understanding what I was seeing that was harder. I wasn't sure if it was the fading light playing tricks on my eyes, or if there really was something there. The boat wobbled under me as I reached for my binoculars without taking my eyes off the figure. The sight that greeted me through the lenses was unexplainable. The figure was closer now, almost human, like with a body about 6 feet tall. What I mistook as fluttering fabric were large leathery type wings folded behind it. But what really threw me out of the loop were its eyes. They were reflective, large red eyes, almost glowing in the deep of the evening. Without thinking, my hand slipped and the binoculars plunged into the water with a splash. The creature looked at me then, releasing an almost unnoticeably soft chirr before it disappeared into the thicket. My mind was racing. I was swept up in a mixture of fear and bewilderment. My arms ached from the sudden jerk of the paddle as I fervently rowed away. The serene river from the afternoon was now poisoned by the eerie encounter. I tried to make it back to the point where I left my car, while the remnants of the day's light were on my side. Halfway there, I considered dumping the kayak and swimming back, but somehow I made it back. Since then, my perspective on nature has undoubtedly changed. It's not just a place of tranquility anymore, but a realm of unanswered questions, a domain where the unexpected thrives. That figure is still etched in my memory. Was it a trick of the shadows that my tired mind fell for? Or was it something unfamiliar that my brain tried hard to label? I often found myself wrestling with these questions. Sometimes we can be so taken in by the rhythm of our mundane lives that we forget the vast expanse of the unknown that still exists out there. I'm sure this story might fuel some fascination in your show's followers. The world is full of unexplainable phenomena, and to be honest, encountering one myself has only sparked my curiosity rather than deterring me from my adventures. Thanks for listening, and if any of your listeners have any similar stories to share, I'd love to hear them.